Welcome to The Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Welcome to a special edition of the Blue Dot podcast, where we're going beyond the bluegrass to explore the people and ideas shaping our democracy in Kentucky and beyond. I'm your co-host, Natalie McDonald.
And I'm Brian Kale. Today we're going not too far beyond the bluegrass as we are hopping over to Ohio to be joined by a very special and widely respected guest, David Pepper.
Mr. Pepper is a lawyer, political activist, former elected official, and author of both fiction and nonfiction literature. He served as chair of the Ohio Democratic Party from 2015 to 2021 and has written extensively about the threats facing American democracy, including his books Laboratories of Autocracy and Saving Democracy, a user's manual for every American. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you. And I often say this. I kind of quote Sarah Palin. I can see Kentucky from my house. So it's good. It's good. I talk about you guys all the time. So it's good to be on the podcast.
Well, and I also, don't tell some of my neighbors here in Kentucky, I also cross the Ohio Ocean every now and then to go shopping and go entertainment. So, I don't necessarily see that divide between Kentucky and Ohio. It's great having you here. Well, David, you've had a fascinating career, many things you've done, and many ways you've served the public, from city council to county commissioner, party chair, and now author and activist. Can you walk us through your journey so our listeners can just get to know you a little better?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Cincinnati. We moved a lot, though, when I was a kid. My dad was at Procter & Gamble, and that took us overseas. And I think that explains some of my sort of ultimate introduction to politics. Somehow being from Cincinnati but living overseas built this very strong connection in my mind to Cincinnati, because wherever we lived in Rome, we lived in Belgium several times. I always knew I was from Cincinnati. And I think when you're overseas as a kid, you're looking for something that grounds you back home. So I think I was a proud Cincinnatian. And we're all pretty proud to be from Cincinnati, but it was very deep within me. And so as a kid, I could have been more proud of my hometown. I went to college out east and in law school. At one point, I would brag about Cincinnati so much, Skyline and Graders and the Reds and the Bengals, that I was named most likely to be president of the Cincinnati Board of Tourism. I was always yapping about Cincinnati. So I really cared about my city, clearly, to win that award, which was, I think, being given to me to tell me to stop talking so much about Cincinnati. So I moved back here after law school, and I was clerking for a judge. And you all may remember in the late 90s, Cincinnati had real challenges. We were losing population. We had terrible police-community relations, a number of controversial shootings, and ultimately riots on our streets. And that's when I decided to run, because the kid who'd always bragged about Cincinnati and all these sort of surface level ways, as a grown-up, and I was around 29 turning 30, thought, geez, I've been bragging about this since the city for so long, and it's my hometown I'm proud of, but I think we can do better than we're doing. That's why I ran for office. I had no political background, didn't know a soul, really, certainly not in politics, because I came back and I clerked for a judge, which you're not allowed to be political when you clerk for a federal judge. But I decided to run for office knowing very little about it. Came up with the slogan, just add pepper, ran all around the city and managed to finish first out of like 30 candidates that first run. And I've been involved ever since. But I tell that because I didn't enter really with a partisan mindset. I entered because I thought this was about public service. And that still is what drives me. And so even later on, if I feel more partisan, clearly I became the chair of the party. That's not how I entered. And the reason I get so upset about gerrymandering and corruption is because I still have that person in me who thinks this is for service, guys. And the more I see politicians who they want to gerrymander things so they never even face accountability back with the people. They're corrupt, so they're driven by the worst motivations and not how to actually do service for people. That still offends me, and I think it's, if I'm psychoanalyzing myself, it's because I still to this day know that I entered it for one reason, and the more I see the opposite sort of motivations, the more it kind of drives me crazy to the point where I wrote a book called Laboratories of Autocracy. So I ran for city council and I won. I later was a county commissioner. I later ran statewide a few times. Didn't quite win. Tough years. They were the sort of Obama midterms, which, as we all lived through painfully, were not a great time to run as a Democrat. But
Yeah.
became party chair, and I've been sort of plugging away ever since. So a lot of my journey is about someone who wasn't that political, entered with this sense of service, somewhat being horrified by the reality that while service is still driving a lot of good people, like your governor, to do this, there are far too many people who are in this for not good reasons. And right now, at too many levels of government, they're kind of in control. And so a lot of what I've written, both fiction and nonfiction in more recent years, is sort of is my almost response to seeing that reality, which kind of shocked a kid who entered all this because he thought it was supposed to be about service. So that's a long introduction, I know, but that's sort of what got me into this.
Yeah, and some of the themes that I hear you talk a lot about are gerrymandering, as you touched on a little bit right there, and autocracy. And I find an interesting take when you talk about autocracy kind of beginning at a state level and really
Right.
like the ground level with state politicians. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about your view that the foundation of autocracy, that system of government controlled by one person, and
Yeah.
how that begins at kind of like that grassroots states level?
Yeah. So I just happened to have it next to me. This book I wrote, Laboratories of Autocracy. When I gave it that title, which I wrote this book in 2021, I was worried that people thought, "Oh, that's just over the top to call them laboratories of autocracy, these state houses." And now people don't. Like, at the time, it might have felt like overstatement, but I saw the state house in Ohio closely enough, and I used it sort of as the example. But the truth is the attack on democracy that we are now living through at all levels really did begin 30 years ago, 20 years ago, with the far right, the Koch brothers, the organization like ALEC, and many other interests figuring out that at the federal level, it was harder to get their knee hooks in to undermine democracy. The easier place to do it were state houses, where no one pays attention, where state houses draw the lines directly, where there is no filibuster at the state house level. They talk a big game when they're not in control about how much they value the filibuster at the federal level, right? Mitch McConnell clings to, well, at the state level, they could care less about the minority party. They ram it through 51-49 if they need to. And so it turns out that for them to accomplish most of their agenda, they've used state houses to do it. And a lot of our state house in Ohio is it's run like Orban runs Hungary. It's not an exaggeration. They break the law all the time. They violate the Constitution. When a court holds that they violate the Constitution, they don't change. They go attack the court. They undermine. They change the way we select courts. I mean, again, if you saw in another country what happens in Ohio, and by the way, Texas, Missouri, Tennessee, it's
Right.
it's very similar. This is where it began, and by doing it there, they've not only controlled state houses the way they have so intensely, but as we're seeing recently, that gerrymandered state house also lets them change the rules at the federal level. Voter suppression, gerrymandering like Texas, like Missouri, like Ohio that's coming up, like they're trying to do in Indiana. So the heart of what's happening is actually state-based. By the way, that's the same way they got Jim Crow into place also. It wasn't a federal law. It was state by state. And what we're seeing now is those state house examples. Not only do they learn from one another, as I described, they're literally each a laboratory, but we're seeing now the pattern of states. We're now seeing it replicated at the federal level as well. But states really are the anchoring of most of what they've done. Most of the damage to America's democracy from, or issues like Dobbs, those all came out of state level politicians. The gerrymandering, the attacks on public schools, so much of it hasn't come again through federal laws where very little gets done. It's largely happened in states. Most of their agenda is being accomplished in states. And so these laboratories of autocracy, my theory is if we really want to protect democracy, it's not going to come through just winning federal elections. We're going to have to actually do even more, and it'll be state based on up. And so we can talk about I don't want that to sound pessimistic. When parties have made comebacks, it's always been through state level up. That's how Karl Rove did it to us in 2010. That's how Howard Dean got things started after Bush got reelected. That's where we can make our comeback. But it's essential that we not view this battle as just a federal swing state battle. That very narrow mindset has really cost us for a very long time, while they've done most of their damage through state level politics.
Well, and I had noticed something. I think it was one of your podcast interviews that I looked at. You just mentioned how the Ohio State Legislature, whatever obstacle you put in front of them, or they just find a way to go around it or just mow over it. For instance, there was a referendum in Ohio in 2018 that passed with a 75% majority outlawing gerrymandering, and clearly Republicans and Democrats alike don't like that. Everybody from at the constituency level agrees that it's a bad thing, but yet it has not stopped the Ohio State Legislature. How have they gone around that, and how, if we're talking about a lawless group of people, it makes it even more difficult to fight back against that.
Yeah, I mean, it's both a democracy crisis and a rule of law crisis. Where
Right.
I'm sitting in an illegal, unconstitutional congressional district. Why? Because they're all unconstitutional. The current map of Ohio, the most recent Supreme Court decision about the current congressional map, was that it was unconstitutional. Yet it still was placed on the ballot and passed. That's why I keep saying, if it was another country, we'd say, what kind of country is that? Like, you literally have been electing people repeatedly on a map that the highest court of the state, which is supposed to be the highest court on the lawfulness or not of that map, rules unconstitutional. They just literally don't care. And then, as I said, what do they do as a response to that? Do they fix the map? No. They changed the way we elect justices, added party ID to the ballot,
Mm-hmm.
in order to undo the court as opposed to fixing the illegal problem. That's how lawless it is here. Not only did they violate sort of some of the specific rules about how maps should be drawn, they also violate the aspect that it was supposed to be done bipartisan. So right now we are literally living in Ohio. Jim Jordan, all of them, they sit in districts that currently today violate the Ohio Constitution. And the current process where they're gerrymandering again isn't to correct that. It's actually to make it worse, because they're upset that 5 Democrats won on a map that was supposed to lead to only 3. So now they're going to double down on that illegality to make it so we only have 2 or 3 Democrats. But that is truly how lawless this place is. So one of the themes of these laboratories of autocracy, these state houses, is it's not only that they're against democracy, they truly are routinely violating the law, and they just get away with it. And that's why, as I mentioned this preview, what worries me now is we are seeing at the federal level, the Trump administration and Miller and others, they're basically trying to do the same thing. Whether it's the battle over California or Portland. In Ohio, the equivalent was, once the court ruled against them, they just did it anyway.
Right.
And that ultimately will be the test of a lot of the federal stuff, is, will they do that as well, and will they get away with it? In Ohio, they have gotten away with it. And so they just keep doing it. Once they see, oh my gosh, there's no enforcement against us, they then just do it every time. That's what we're living with here.
Yeah. And even in Kentucky, the same congressperson who represents people on the Mississippi River represents people in Frankfort, which is, kind of in the middle of the state. It just kind of like wraps around. So, of course, we're seeing it here too. And like you said, we have a fantastic governor, which is, trying to like hold things together. But it just seems like, as you said, we're seeing it now at the federal level, where this rule of law just does not exist.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we overcome it. And the other thing I try to challenge myself to think about is that if the shoe were on the other foot, in what world would I support this if, let's say, this were a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris doing these roles? And I can't find a way in which I would. So I don't know if that is just my
Right.
blind me being blind to my echo chamber, or if you think that I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, let's just say this. So until recently, I would have spoken out against any gerrymander. But when they are trying to steal the 26 election of these midterm gerrymanders, I support what Gavin Newsom is doing. But even then, look what he's doing. In Ohio, they just violated the Ohio Constitution, right? Gavin Newsom is seeking a referendum
Mhm.
to get himself citizen approval to draw a new map. So even when they're doing what they're doing, and he has to fight fire with fire there, the minute they don't gerrymander, we should never. Gerrymandering should not be done in any state in the country. But if they're going to do it in multiple states, we have to combat it. But even then, in Ohio, they simply violated the Constitution. Gavin Newsom is seeking the approval of the voters of California to fight fire with fire. So even when we are doing it sort of to combat it, we still aren't lawless. For example, New York State, Republicans will say, well, New York gerrymandered. A New York court in 2021 said that the New York Democrats were violating the New York Constitution by doing it too aggressively. And the New York Democrats immediately followed that court order. Now, and the map reflected their willingness to follow that court order. In Ohio, they literally violated the court order. So there is a level of lawlessness on their side that even when we decide we must be aggressive, we aren't doing the same thing. And I'm glad. I mean, once you
Yeah.
literally decide you are gonna violate the law, then I think all bet then you just really have lost your sense of, again, both democracy and that you're a rule of law, government.
Well, I mean, at least we'll be able to look ourselves in the mirror, I guess, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. I thought one of the points that you made that was very interesting about maybe it speaks to this ability to be lawless is maybe an underappreciation of democracy because so many Republicans currently in office grew up under this gerrymandered environment. So they've never really run competitive races, been in competitive races. They might have had to win a primary, which takes a couple thousand votes. But
Yep,
after that, they're uncontested
yep,
or, no way they could lose because of the district they were running in. So they don't maybe even have an understanding of democracy or care about democracy
yep,
because they've not really ever been in a democratic
yep.
situation.
I mean, it's an entire generation. The entire generation of almost every Republican in office today, up to and including Mike Johnson, whose first two races for
Right.
state house were uncontested. It's not just gerrymandering. It's many of them have never had an election.
Mm.
They've never had to run
Mm.
for city council like I did. If you've run for school board and you're listening to this, you've been in more democracy than Mike Johnson ever has. And so think about that. His
Wow.
first two races were uncontested. At least two of his races, I think, for Congress have been uncontested. If you came to power without even facing an opponent, it's not just that you're scared of democracy. You haven't done the things that you got to go. If you're me, and this is again, everything goes back to I think why I feel this way from my own beginning. I had to knock on swing voters' doors and talk to them. I had to have doors shut in my face. I'm used to that. That's fine. I would say, I'll put you down as undecided and try and joke about it. Um, I know what it's like to have to actually negotiate a competitive race. These people have never had to do that. So not only, I think, are they not knowledgeable of it, they're scared of it. And again, I mentioned it. They look at what happened in Ohio. They rigged two districts to support Republicans in Ohio in that illegal map, and two Democrats won them. So they're afraid of fair districts because they think, oh my gosh, if we have to stand up and defend, abortion bans, no exceptions, a tax on public schools, money going to vouchers to a private school 200 miles away, healthcare costs, all of it, if we have to defend that in a fair district, my God, we're going to lose. There's nothing we can say to defend our policies. So, let alone the fact that we've never actually knocked on a door. We've never had to raise money because we were worried about our race. So, this is an entire generation. All they've ever known is gerrymandering. And the idea of being in a real election in fair districts scares the heck out of them. And that's why they do nothing more intensely. The Ohio State House does nothing. They're on vacation all the time. They do its special interest, but you put the gerrymandering task in front of them, it's like nothing is
Man,
more
they're
important. Yeah, they're on
all
it.
over it.
Secret meetings, long-term planning. I wish they governed as well as they gerrymander. It is their obsession because everything flows from it. And the idea of actually facing vote. What happened when we had an election in Ohio, a referendum on abortion? 57-43, crushed them.
Right.
What happened when we had one on gerrymandering? 75-25, overwhelming. Legalizing marijuana, even more decisive. They know that they are out of step with the mainstream, and they know that they themselves have never been in a real election. They're scared of them. So they work at nothing harder than to keep rigging these elections, and they'll put in the time and they'll raise the money to make sure that they succeed in that so they don't have to worry about anything else. So yeah, once I discovered this as I did my research, it's all these people have ever known. And I think there really is just an abject fear of ever facing a candidate in a 50-50 district because when that happens, they pretty much lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up 2 points. I'm a firm believer that not having power doesn't make you powerless. That each of us have to really do what we can do where we are when we can. And gerrymandering is a way that they take away the people's power, right? So going back to that, everything happens at a grassroots level. I think it only makes it more important to realize that it has to be done at the precinct level. It has to be done
Yes.
at the school board level. You know, in Kentucky, we have this Growing the Blue Dot initiative, hence the Blue Dot podcast name. And it's really a way to have a grassroots organizing model to get out there and knock on doors and
Right.
canvass and listen and try to make a difference. And I feel like that's the only way we'll succeed at getting rid of the supermajority in Kentucky, at least.
Let me say I have half a chapter in this book, Saving Democracy, dedicated to this. The lowest hanging fruit in politics today is precinct organizing. It just takes people wanting to do it. This isn't big money. We don't need some billionaire to do it. And I say this in the book. If 30% of the people who have the official assignment, in Ohio, we call them precinct executives. I don't know what you call them there. They're different names everywhere. If 30
Officers.
if 30% of the people elected to be the precinct leader or chosen actually said, "You know what? I'm gonna own my precinct. When they're new residents, I'm gonna knock on their door. If there's an apartment building in my precinct, I'm gonna make sure we have a captain of that building who works the floors, who maybe comes up with a floor captain, the places where we know turnout is too low. And these are small enough units that you can own them, you can take ownership. If 30% of the precinct organizers of Ohio and Kentucky decided to simply say, "Hey, I'm the precinct leader. I'm going to organize this precinct," outcomes would change. Why? Because right now, maybe 5% of people do it. If we took that number to 50%, we'd start winning elections all over. We know the biggest voting block in many races is the people who don't vote at all. Precinct
Right.
organizing gets you to them. And the reason I think it's so important is because right now, your big campaigns are generally geared at the people who vote almost every election. And so
Mm.
the people who don't vote every election, they almost never get engaged by campaigns or parties. Or if they do, it's with 1 week to go, a desperate knock on the door saying, "Don't forget to vote," which only confirms for them what they've always believed. These people don't care about me, or I would have heard them earlier. Precinct organizing means that precinct leader has been talking to those voters the entire cycle. And so they feel valued, they feel heard versus, the last minute sort of text saying, "This is the most important election ever, show up." Well, again, if it was that important, I would have heard from you before. So the precinct level work, and I love what you're doing. The idea that all across the states like ours, we have blue dots, we have people reaching out, we have people registering all the time. And it's not, again, no offense to volunteers, it's not a college kid volunteering the last month. It's a neighbor who took the time to talk to you. All of that, I think, is why, again, I say that level of organizing. And again, we're not talking about millions of people. Like we're talking about thousands of people
Right.
deciding this is what I will do. I will own my precinct. I will work this precinct. I will do it face to face. Enough people doing that could change the outcome without all the billions it takes to run all the ads.
And my precinct went for Governor Bashir by 1 vote, and I'd like to think it was mine.
By the way, I have never loved. I mean, I always have thought of us as a tri-state. Um, I have never been more proud of Northern Kentucky than the first Bashir election, where your counties like saved the day.
Kenton.
And I met a few of the people later who were part of the actually, some of the folks who worked on that campaign later came and worked, on the Ohio side, and I would always brag about them because they were, like, the leaders of some of the campaign there, and I'd be like, "They saved Kentucky," because everyone takes credit for a narrow win, right? But your Northern Kentucky counties flipping blue really was a massive difference in Bashir's win, so great work.
It was so fun to watch on election night. I was like,
Oh,
"Look at that." I mean, it
it
just
was I was the Ohio chair then, and I tried to show that this also meant good things for Ohio because the suburbs around Cincinnati, both on the Kentucky and the Ohio side, end up being, they're trending more blue if we do our job, and they can make the difference in these statewide elections. And by the way, that is true in Ohio as well, that it used to be that Butler County, Warren County, Claremont County would just absolutely destroy a Democratic candidate. But those counties actually were a big part of actually their margins in that abortion referendum were so narrow. It was a big part of why that was successful long term. So on some of these issues, these collar counties that include yours and Ohio sides, they're showing that they're not quite as conservative as some of the far right. And that
Mhm.
ends up, and it's a lot of it's women, and that ends up being a trend that could really matter going forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that talk there about the precinct, I'm a precinct captain, my wife and I are, and we just had our first meeting of all the precinct captains in our community, and we said, let's get them together as a group, Laura and I, my wife, because we just wanted to go out and start knocking on doors, and we're waiting for some lists and everything. But I, boy, what you said just makes me feel really good about our thoughts are if you have a neighbor come and knock on your door, whether you're really Democrat or Republican or whatever, it's just neighbor to neighbor saying, hey, just to let you know, we're here if you have questions, or here's, where we stand, and make sure you know who's running and, what elections are coming up, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think that goes a long way.
Get their emails and have a little newsletter, have a barbecue the summer
Yeah.
before. Here's the ideal situation where you've succeeded. When that of course, late in the campaign, the candidate's gonna show up or their volunteers. When they knock on that door with a week to go, it's the person says, "Oh, thanks for coming by, but I've been talking to my precinct leader for a year and a half. We know all about your campaign. You might go to a different door. We got you covered." Like, it's the last of many conversations as opposed to the first. That's when we're
Mm,
succeeding, that you've done so much work that it's redundant by the end. And
mhm.
by the way, you send them to another door where maybe they haven't met with them, but that you've been working that precinct so long, they're fully informed.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, you mentioned vouchers, and I know that you just recently made a trip down to Robertson County after the Kentucky vote on vouchers. And
Yeah.
yeah, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you
Sure.
found out? What motivated you to go down there? What was so interesting? And
You might be surprised. I have spent almost a year bragging about Robertson County, Kentucky. I was at a conference of historians in Chicago talking about Robertson County, and someone from Kentucky raised their hand, like, "I know that county." I think I believe it's the smallest county in Kentucky,
Mhm.
2,000 people. I think maybe 1,000 voters. But I was so depressed after. I'll be honest. I was so depressed after Trump won everywhere, including Ohio and Kentucky. I was looking for something positive to take from it. And the first thing that jumped out was the result of your referendum in Kentucky on vouchers.
Mhm.
Because you know this better than I did, but around the country, no one knew. By the way, no referendum on vouchers has ever succeeded. It's one example where on their issues, be it abortion bans or public schools, the Republicans are literally out of step with their own voters.
Yeah.
So you know this, that voucher referendum in Kentucky lost in every single county,
Mm.
got destroyed. And I give a lot of credit to Andy Bashir for his ads, but what I learned in Robertson County is even before he spoke up, this thing was losing. Uh, it did worse largely the smaller the county, and it did especially
Mm.
bad in, frankly, very small red counties. And nowhere did it do worse. The worst county in Kentucky for that voucher was Robertson County, even though Robertson County voted 80-20 for Trump. And
Mm.
so I wrote that up, and I still was depressed. I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to Robertson County. And I've got an F-150 truck, and I got my truck, and I drove the hills there. And I thought, I'm going to talk to the good people of Robertson County. I'm not going to bring up the fact that I didn't vote for the guy they voted for president. I'm going to talk to them about why it was that they voted so much against this referendum, which was the heart of Donald Trump's education plan. So they vote for
Mhm.
Trump, but they demolished this referendum. So I went to the dollar store there, talked to the cashier. I went to the library. I went to the gas station. Um, I went to a few other places. I had the best. I honestly had an amazing few hours talking about this issue. So I'd go up to everyone. I'd say, "Hey, I'm curious. This was a week later. Why do you think? Why do you think Robertson County was the county that most voted against this voucher thing?" And it was, I think it was issue 1 or issue 2. I can't remember what number. And they at first one guy said, "Wait, are you asking me how I vote?" I said, "Oh, no, no, no. I would never do that. But how do you why do you think the county was so decisive?" Everyone's first response, "Well, why would I ever have my tax dollars go into a private school hundreds of miles from here that I couldn't afford to get to anyway, or my kids could?" So it was this very common sense response. It was the first thing they said. And then I would say, I would dig a little more. And then they said they would say a little more deeply, "And we love Robertson County schools. We love our schools."
Mhm.
And it said, I can't remember the slogan, but like, "Our town is the school," was essentially what they said. "This is our community, Robertson Schools." And
Mhm.
then some would say, "And because we're a small county, we've always worried that our school may disappear.
Mm.
It's already been a worry of ours. And our worry was that if this happened, it would be the final straw in destroying Robertson County schools. And we love our school." And they would tell me things like, our principal every morning, it gave me chills. Rain, snow, sleet, or sun is waving as we drop our kids off. We all know the teachers, they work so hard. They sell things at the concession stand for sports. They have arts events there. The veterans meet there. Why would we ever risk our school? Um, it was really hard. The woman at the dollar store said, "Oh, did you not notice my Robertson cheerleading earrings?
Alright.
I'm part of the cheer moms," like all of it. And then it went one level deeper that gets us back to the precinct stuff. Then they said, and the teachers told us it would hurt this school and our community. And I'm a big fan of our teachers unions,
Mm.
but they weren't talking about the
Same.
union. They were talking about individual teachers that they knew and respected, who were apparently posting on a Facebook page, "If this thing passes, it's going to really hurt our school system." And what I gathered from that and the library were like, "Oh, our retirees meet here every 2 weeks." They were all saying how bad this would be. Those trusted voices were saying this thing is a problem. And those trusted voices, before one TV ad had run, had already communicated to that community, this is bad for our community. And that's why I say this thing was losing before any TV ads, because not because someone knocked on the door with a week to go, but someone who's the equivalent of a precinct leader, a neighbor, was saying to
Neighbor.
that
Yeah.
community, "This thing is bad for us. It will hurt us. Don't anyone vote for it." And it was clearly spread in that community. Again, the awareness of the issue was amazing. Everyone, they would say to me, I don't know why anyone else voted against it, but I'll tell you why I voted against it, meaning they were proud of their no vote.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So the point is, like, to me, it was a great example where we gotta run in more places because when we do, we can connect on issues like schools that we might otherwise never think we can connect on. But secondly, we have to organize in the way that that community organically organized. They were against it because trusted local people were informed and communicating in trusted channels that this thing was bad, and that so that level of organizing that showed me back to the precinct conversation. It showed me that that's how we will connect better on all these issues if we have local people running, but we also have local people talking, and it's the local respected leader talking and not simply the party person coming in from out of county to tell them how to vote. So to me, I wrote a whole chapter in my book on, believe it or not, on Robertson County, because I want to go back. I mean, they probably, if I started talking about other things, they probably wouldn't welcome me so much. But when I went there to talk about their school system, I had an amazing day there.
Yeah.
And I think it tells us a lot about how we have to think about politics a little differently than our traditional model. But also, if we do it, the opportunity we have to connect on issues like public schools.
It's funny when I first started out doing healthcare consulting, and back when I was doing market research, there was not one primary care physician in the entire county down there in Robertson County, which is
Oh, yeah.
kind of crazy to think about. But I was going to ask you, your latest book is that user's manual of how ordinary people can do extraordinary things to fight back. And I was going to ask you, what are everyday things that people can do? And really, you just laid out the example right there, right? It's just talking to
Yes.
your neighbors, and it's
And
just
and
talking
taking
person to
ownership.
person. Yeah.
Those teachers, again, those teachers and others, they took ownership of that issue. They said, "We are gonna communicate with our community about this issue." And so I would say, like, if you're a precinct person, it's a simple mindset. I didn't sign up to be a precinct person just to go to a meeting every month to endorse candidates. I signed up to take ownership of the geography of my precinct, and I'm gonna own it, and that'll cost a little bit money for the food at the barbecue, but we're not but it's more the mindset of owning the communication and the welcoming and all that. I would say one of my big obsessions is, no longer leaving so many districts uncontested. If you're
Hmm.
not running for state house in Robertson County, then they may convince themselves the reason their school is struggling is, because the Republicans will say, "Oh, it's because of critical race theory or the border," and the answer is no. It's because at least in other places, at least it's because vouchers are defunding by the state rep that represents them. But if you're not running in that place, they never hear that. So we have
Hmm.
to run in more places. So another way to take ownership is to think to yourself, "Hey, if I'm in a place where we haven't been contesting against an incumbent for a while, let's change that." Either run yourself or convince someone else to run, but that's another level of ownership. Another big one is registering voters. So much of the attack on democracy is through purging of voters and new laws that make it harder. So all sorts of organizations that aren't even political or partisan, nonprofits, they could be registering voters all the time. Every mayor of a major city should be using the public facing part of City Hall to register voters who come to health clinics or rec centers or libraries. So I go through all these ways in the book that people can take ownership. I worry greatly that the scale of the attack on democracy, it's full time. It's the use of government power to suppress the vote or rig districts. It's billionaires spending money to make things harder. The scale of the fight for democracy is too often part time, volunteer. We have Democrats in power who often don't use their power for example, to register voters. So we have to scale up our fight for democracy, and most of that scale will come if each one of us figures out in our what I call footprint of influence. We have to all figure out how to use more of our footprint to do it. Whether it's our where we live, whether it's where we work, whether it's nonprofits we're part of, beyond the typical political work we do, which most don't even do that. There are other ways we can make a difference, and if we all start thinking that way, the truth is our scale could be a lot bigger than it is right now, and it really has to be if we're gonna compete. There are more of us than there are of them, but they scaled their anti-democracy attack very large a long time ago, and we've got a lot of catching up to do.
It made me feel a lot better
Yeah.
today.
Oh, good.
You did.
Well, the scale of the need is huge, but I feel, I mean, and Natalie will back me up. I mean, we are hearing so much enthusiasm and passion and anger and frustration that's driving a lot of people to get involved that maybe have kind of been ignoring this for a long time. So we need to take advantage of that and harness that power that's right there in front of us right
Yep.
now and use it to our
And
advantage.
and I would add, and harness it again, as much as I'm a fan of your governor, we can't spend all of our time just obsessing about the '28 election. The
Right.
'26 election is the election where we save democracy. So
Absolutely.
channel the energy not just about who runs for the presidency in '28, but let's contest every state house in '26. Let's
Hmm.
win in Virginia in 1 month. I think we have
Yes.
a huge opportunity there. And so this is, what did Karl Rove do after Obama won? And we literally, the Time magazine declared the Republican Party extinct in March of 19. Karl Rove wasn't sitting around dreaming about Mitt Romney in 12. He took the energy that they had on the ground, the Tea Party, and he used it to contest state house races in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, where they had just lost badly. And so we have to take the energy, which I agree. I think our energy is bigger than any Tea Party ever was. I mean, these protests we're seeing, there's another one coming up.
Absolutely.
There's big energy. We have to harness that energy for the next set of elections, which is the 25 and 26 cycle, where we
Hmm.
can make a massive pushback, protect democracy by winning there. And then we roll into 28, where your governor and many others are going to be making their case to be president. But 26 is the year. This is the year
26
where
is
we
huge.
have to put a stake in the ground and contest in far more places. And think not just about the House majority of the U.S. House, but think about the unaccountable gerrymandered people in the states that are doing most of the damage. That's what we have to really focus on in the next year and a month. And then we roll from there.
Yeah, I was Heather Cox Richardson. I was listening to I don't know her a couple days ago. She said there are 52,000 elections coming up in November 2025 from the local all the way up. So it's happening. I mean, right there. I mean, there's plenty for us to sink our teeth into.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one other free advice, Natalie, I'm always looking for ways to uplift myself and others, and those people are generally running for the same reason I ran for city council: service. School board, city council. I went to a barbecue backyard party 2 weeks ago for a bunch of school board races in suburban Cincinnati, a place called Anderson. I haven't felt that good in a long time.
Yeah.
Because I heard from wonderful people who are running to help kids and property owners and others have the best school district. I felt like $1,000,000 because they were a reminder of why we do this. And sometimes the higher up we go and we see shutdowns and illegal maps, it can be a downer. But if you go in the next month, and I think our early voting starts tomorrow. It's on Tuesday. Um, you will feel better about the world, I believe, if you go out and help a school board candidate next month or a city council candidate. Because for the most part, I think that's still where a lot of the good service happens and where a lot of the candidates are stepping up just to do good service. And so if you want to feel a little bit better about things, like organize your precinct and help local candidates, because they will be a daily reminder about this, that this is what it's supposed to be about. And when they win, they can go do some great public service.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been with these listening sessions, these deep canvassing, get out, spread the blue dot events that we're doing. You're right. And we would knock on doors. You know how it is. You knock on doors, but people want to talk. They
Yeah.
want to talk.
Yeah.
And it's something that I haven't experienced in a while, knocking on doors and pounding the pavement. So there's enthusiasm there for sure. But I sure do thank you. I sure do thank you for coming on here and talking to us and giving us all of your insight. This has been a great discussion. We really, really appreciate it.
No, this was
Yeah,
fun.
we
I know I blew over our 20 minutes, so
I love it. No, it's all right. It was great
well
I
conversation.
we
well,
we have
it's
all
great to
kinds
talk to
of
you, and I feel a kinship with, Northern Kentucky, and like I said, I was cheering so loud the nights, I mean, both elections, but the first one, when you guys came up blue, and it clearly was, like, the margin at least. I loved it, and I've always had a good relationship with friends just across the river, so I'm glad to do it, and let's just stay in touch.
Absolutely. I've knocked on plenty of doors over there in Ohio too. So yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, David.
See
All
ya.
right.
Thanks so
Take
much.
care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye bye. To our listeners, check out David's work at davidpepper.com and savedemocracy.us. Also, please check out David's Substack, Pepperspectives. That's it for this podcast. Thank you for joining. We look forward to our next full-length podcast on October 20th, where we will be joined by the president of the Northern Kentucky Labor Council, Timothy Donahue.
Yes, and don't forget you can also join the conversation on our Facebook and Instagram pages or at blue.podcast.com. And if you like listening to the podcast, please consider donating to help fund it, which you can do by clicking on the donate link at blue.podcast.com. Until next time, stay curious, keep the facts in focus, and never stop fighting for what matters. Peace out, everybody.